All right, and we are live. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Endless Report. I'm your host, Tony, as always, and today's a bit of a special episode as it's the 40th edition of the Endless Report. So it's kind of a milestone, I thought, an even 40 there. Maybe 50 will be a little bit bigger, I guess. But thank you to everyone who's watched along with me for these past 40 episodes. I've had a blast being able to do this every Friday. That being said, we do have a lot of news this week, I will say. Definitely a lot of news. A lot of, unfortunately, some not so great news for the industry this week. We do have some other, game announcements, some things to look forward to, especially. So I'll leave that for the end. We'll probably do a bad news, good news kind of scenario here with the docket today. But that being said, we're probably gonna hop right into it. I do apologize. I may be a little like nasally sounding today. I'm a little bit under the weather here, kind of have a little bit of a cold, but show must go on. Nothing too terrible. We can't get through the news today, so no worries there. But bear with me as I pull up our docket and we'll see all the stories we got here. Assuming you're watching on video, again, I'm assuming everybody may be listening as well, depending on if you're listening or watching. So I'll try to describe to you everything we got on screen here. But speaking of what's on screen, if you are watching, you will see we're going to talk a little bit more about The Last of Us. So, of course, The Last of Us HBO show finally premiered on Sunday. We've been talking about it nonstop for the past year or so since it was announced. Of course, last week as well, anticipation. I will say, just broad thoughts right out of the gate there. I thought it was great. Obviously I'm a fan of the Last of Us games. I love both games. I was a bit interested. I wouldn't say as apprehensive as some people were with the adaptation of the TV. I think a lot with video game adaptations there is that curiosity. Sometimes people are not as happy with adaptations as others, depending on the which adaptation it is. But I have seen across the board people have been very, very happy with this Last of Us TV show, the work HBO has put into it, not only, with just obviously that incredible budget they have, bigger than Game of Thrones, that set design, the casting, just everything, really feels like you're in that world. So I got to give a shout out to that show. Definitely enjoyed that over the weekend. And I'll be watching, I'm sure, the rest of the episodes coming up these next few Sundays over the course of the next month or two, I guess, however long that's airing. That being said, you see that headline there on the screen that we're talking about the new Last of Us multiplayer factions game again. So we got some new little tidbits on that this week, as well as last week, really, with everything going on with The Last of Us right now. They're talking about kind of a bit of everything. So you see here in the article that Neil Druckmann, of course, the writer of the original games and now the TV show, of course, is saying here that the game they're currently working on, is their most ambitious title ever. So if you're not aware of this Last of Us multiplayer game, there's still not much to call it. There's no official title yet. I've been calling it Last of Us Factions because that's what the original game's multiplayer mode was called. So everybody's been kind of calling it Factions or Factions 2, whatever this big, large scale version of that multiplayer might be. It's obviously much more ambitious, much more of a, an in-depth open world, maybe, live service, maybe, these are all question marks, but big game here, it seems. So if you're not familiar with the first game's multiplayer mode, it was like a team v team, very small, close quarters, like the kind of Last of Us gameplay you'd probably be familiar with if you're aware of the games. Very, very limited ammo. You're a lot of crawling and listening for enemy footsteps and like very tactical gameplay. So it looks like here that they're evolving that to have some sort of large scale, maybe open world survival. I think things like DayZ or even, more modern battle royale type, games that I think you can combine, or Escape from Tarkov is someone people mention a lot. I think that's a great example of these kind of open world. There's player versus player combat. There's player versus environment combat with the zombies and the clickers. I shouldn't say zombies with The Last of Us. They kind of avoid that word, but it's a lot going on here. And I think to have a large scale game, and Neil Druckmann would just say, not only have they been working on this for a long time, which we're very aware of because we've been hearing about them working on it for a long time, as he says, but the fact that it's the most ambitious project they've ever done, expanding the Last of Us world even further, continuing to tell a story, but in a multiplayer space. But he won't say too much else about that, and that's kind of me pseudo quoting him there. So, kind of directly from the quote there, you hear it again. It's the most ambitious Naughty Dog project ever. Which, if you look back at the Uncharted series, all the Last of Us games, Jack and Daxter, and some of the older titles, I've always loved what Naughty Dog, not Insomniac, Naughty Dog has done with PlayStation, and I really do think to hear them say it's their most ambitious project ever, regardless what it is, it's definitely going to be interesting. Definitely want to keep my eye on, since I've loved every other project they've done in the past. So definitely, not a lot of like concrete information there. Again, one of those stories where it's just more of them, talking about what's happening. It's still in the works. I think it's 100% chance. I shouldn't say 100% on anything, but 99% chance you're going to see more news about this game sometime before the end of 2023. I'd be utterly shocked if this game wasn't at least either releasing like this fall, or we're getting some sort of news about it either this summer or coming this fall. But I really would. I'm dying to know more about the Last of Us factions. Maybe that's just me being optimistic and wanting to hear more about it. But again, like I said before, similar to Uncharted 4's The Lost Legacy, it was originally kind of built as an expansion, maybe pseudo like DLC expansion pack that ended up becoming so big. And so, so it's so cool in its own right as its project that became its own game. And The Lost Legacy, I still think is one of the best Uncharted games, if not like top tier in terms of what Uncharted's produced. So I think, same thing here, that Factions was going to just be the multiplayer add-on for the second Last of Us. That didn't happen. It's been 2 years, really almost 3 years now since The Last of Us Part 2 is released, and they're still working on it. So obviously it's going to be its own game. Obviously it's going to be bigger than anything we've ever done before. We said that all just now. So it's pretty exciting to see that it was just something that wasn't even planned to be its own project, but it's built in that engine, has that Last of Us universe, has all of the, I'm sure, inspiration and kind of like that, maybe like cross-pollination is the word I would use between all the IPs and all the TV shows and the comics and the books and the multiplayer game, in terms of, having also the remaster of Part 1 being widely available, can be on PC next month. There's a lot going on that you can kind of like cross over between all these different mediums with the Last of Us IP and really get that synergy going. One other thing I did want to mention here, is why I put Last of Us ETC in the docket, because they had a few updates here, was that I am aware that the game itself, The Last of Us Part 1, that remaster, had a huge uptick in sales since the premiere of the show. Go figure. Of course, we said this back, when we first talked about that game. Of course, they're going to get that out before The Last of Us show. It's a huge tool, for that. Just, again, the same idea there, that cross-marketing. I watched the show. Oh, man, I'd love to go play the game. Boom, here it is. New, high-quality PS5 format. So they planned that out well. We talked about it for a while. They made sure they got that remaster out or around the show's premiere. Seems like it took a little longer with PC, but they're getting it there. But definitely smart there. A lot of synergy, and it seems like they're even offering it in some free trials. I know if you have PS Premium though only. So if you are a PlayStation Plus user, unfortunately, I don't think you get that demo. But if you do subscribe to PS Premium, where you get all like the exclusive game demos and the like that they already advertise, they've just added the first 2 hours, I believe, of The Last of Us Part 1. So if you've gone and watched the show, or if you haven't yet or you want to, and you want to dabble in the game a bit, there you go, if you're a PlayStation fan. That being said, I think that's about all I want to talk about here on this article with Naughty Dog. There's actually one more tidbit, though, that I thought was really worth mentioning. So I'm just going to just flip this over with all my tabs here right on the screen and not click on the main website screen. But there we go. And you can see here at this headline, if you're not watching, of course, I'll read it here. The Last of Us director not credited in HBO show. So again, I'll clarify the context of this headline, but very, very interesting headline. Was not expecting this. So recently, Bruce Straley, who is now, I believe, over at Wildflower Interactive, we actually reported on this back when Bruce Straley announced Wildflower Interactive, and we showed the trailer here on the show. Formerly a Naughty Dog developer, formerly, I believe he left after his work on Uncharted 4, but was the co-director of The Last of Us, the original Last of Us, I would say Part 1, but not technically that Part 1 remaster when it was still just The Last of Us. He co-directed that game and obviously had a lot of work into that first game. It was a name I had known for quite some time, involved with Naughty Dog, not even, knowing a ton of the players, in the game, in this studio here. It was always a name that I knew as a fan of The Last of Us. So surprisingly here, it's not something I noticed until I read this article, but he is just kind of made a comment how he's a little upset that there is no credit for him whatsoever in the new HBO show. And before I get into this, I do think this is actually kind of an interesting issue here, and not only just an issue, but more so of a question in terms of when is crediting necessary or applicable, not applicable to, this is something we talk about a lot when I took a lot of film classes in college, and we talked a lot about, syndication and writers' rights. If you were the original writer of that pilot or that concept, regardless if you were involved in any of the further seasons or production, that sometimes that original credit is always getting residuals and always, being credited. And there are certain things that do get that credit where you're always attached to certain things where you made the original script, or you did this, but since you're not, or you directed this, but since you're not the original writer, you don't get that, that monetary and name recognition on the further projects. So I'm not sure if I'm being super clear here, but that's just kind of like a broad strokes description of like how some crediting can kind of work in the film industry, where if you're the original writer or creator of an IP, how that kind of gets handled. So how this works here is we do know, of course, we just mentioned Neil Druckmann in our last article, who was the original writer of The Last of Us. The other, of course, co-director of the original game here with Bruce Straley. So it seems here that, Neil Druckmann had written the original game, as far as I'm aware, had brought that to the higher ups at Naughty Dog at the time. I believe this was still when they were working on Uncharted or wherever they were at the time, maybe Uncharted 3, I believe. I'm could be very well mistaken here, so take this all with a grain of salt. But I do believe that that was an original story written by Neil Druckmann. Of course, I'm assuming that after going into full production and then co-directing the game with Bruce Straley over multiple years, Bruce Straley surely had a sizable impact on this narrative and certain things that happened and gameplay elements that may have changed the story. Like, of course, there's years of work that I got into that. That even though he may have not written the original script of Joel and Ellie and this whole world, he of course maybe had a very, very huge impact on making The Last of Us exactly what it is today, maybe. And that's one of those things where, especially when we talk about things that aren't so what's the word? Quantifiable, because they are these very quantifiable efforts, but it's hard. There's no real number sometimes to put on a page if this is X, Y, and Z, what percentage of what everybody did this project. This is art, and it takes a lot of collaboration and a lot of things that maybe can't necessarily be quantified, of just ideas and brainstorming and working together that people contribute. So this is ongoing as much as it is in the film industry, or even literature, maybe not so as much, but film and TV, especially in terms of who is credited for what, especially in terms of adaptations. Of course, when we get here to a TV or film adaptation, this gets a little, I guess, a hairy situation here. So barring all of my kind of like, preluding to the issue here, I will get into what Bruce Straley actually had to say about the matter and what he's kind of discussing here about what he thinks should have happened in this scenario. So of course they just reiterate here that he did leave Naughty Dog after the release of Uncharted 4 and didn't contribute to The Last of Us Part 2. That being said, again, he was the co-director of the original game. That is the source material, at least for now, that the TV show is covering. It has nothing really to do with The Last of Us Part 2 yet. So I do think that is, while that is relevant to point out, that's maybe not as relevant to the current situation. But he does say here, and I'm going to quote, Shirley says that the lack of credit has made him wonder if the video game industry really does need unionization. So we talked a lot about video game unionization last week with Microsoft, actually. Some calls for there over at Ubisoft with recent comments. We discussed this a little bit, and we're going to have to actually get more into that. Excuse me, I'm stumbling here a lot of my brain. I'm just thinking there's so much that this connects to in all these stories. Later in the show, as you'll see on the docket, with unfortunately some huge layoffs, and not just the gaming, but in the tech industry in general that we're getting into, but most notably at Microsoft earlier this week. But that being said, kind of getting out of that conversation for the moment, he says it's an argument for unionization here that, quote, that someone who is part of the co-creation of that world and those characters isn't getting credit or a nickel for the work they put into it, he told the LA Times. He said, quote, maybe we need unions in the video game industry to be able to protect our creators. Notably, Naughty Dog's co-presidents, Neil Druckmann and Evan Wells, spoke out against unions back in 2021. I do remember this story. This was back when Naughty Dog was kind of under a little bit of bad press for crunch culture, as many studios have been in recent years. And this is, it is a relevant story to that, I think, especially in regards to that recent announcement. He says, this is straight from Bruce Straley here, who says he left the studio in large part due to burnout. And that's coming from a higher level executive, someone who's not, again, a lot of the burnout was reported by the Naughty Dog staff, but I feel like there were quotes, especially when Rockstar was under similar fire for burnout and overtime working. And they had made a comment, I believe that someone in the Rockstar management team, of, we're working double the amount of hours anyone on that development team is anyway. We're here all night, every day, 100 hours a week. And at a certain point, it's like, well, I don't get me wrong, I really, in certain ways, I do admire, that grind to get a game out. As much as I'm not, I'm certainly not promoting crunch culture or unfair, working practices. Absolutely, don't get me wrong there. But when everyone is willing to and are being, appropriately, credited and compensated there, and everyone is getting into, I struggle to use the word crunch, but I guess it is really the most applicable word. There is an admiration there. Sometimes, certain, some of the best games or some of the best performances, or you think of any, any movie, or book or sport, sports even. You think of like great events like that in entertainment, and a lot of them come through these real big pushes of effort or things that may have only happened, because it was a product of its time in that place where they were able to get a certain collaboration going. We look at certain games that we think of like may have not come out if it didn't happen in like, this rapid pace, or, the history of gaming is full of stories like that where these projects need to be done in a month or so. And if they didn't, it could have, collapsed certain, industries. And I'm getting a bit off tangent here, on a tangent here, but I think you understand what I mean, where I think that, you know, obviously, if someone says at a higher level, there's a limit to that. And, there's a limit to everybody really like, crunching and pushing in to get that final product out. And there's a point where it's not just that, it's maybe more just, a management issue. And that's the bottom line there. So I think that seems to be what's going on with that situation. We've seen a lot of this in the industry with people, excuse me here, got a little bit of a cough, changing the way they handle these things. And unfortunately, it seems that's not the most, the most fortunate situation here. I hope maybe this can be worked out. I'm not sure exactly how it would, but I do know this was a big kind of push when they did push Wildflower Interactive about having a certain type of different working culture that maybe, at least according to Bruce Straley, wasn't present at Naughty Dog at that time. So I'm not sure if they have commented on this back yet from Naughty Dog, in defense of these comments, or HBO Max or anybody of those teams have. That being said, I'm not sure if he goes on to say anything else here other than them just promoting their own studios and kind of making that comment about unionization. So again, it seems to be a bit of a side comment from the past former co-director of The Last of Us there. Well, I do think, whether it's financial or not, well, I do think maybe like based on the game, created by maybe I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on who should get credited or exactly how those hierarchy of those systems work. That being said, it seems like there are some sort of like, standing systems, as I imply here, especially in the film industry. There definitely is a crediting system that certain rules are followed. I wonder how loosely maybe that same system exists in gaming, or if it even is followed, or it's the traditional, credit hierarchy of how credits should roll. Every game does have roll its credits in a similar way to, traditional films and movies would. So I shouldn't say every game, but I'm assuming a lot of games tend to follow these certain practices, and I would hope, that in the future, regardless of what it is, whether it is a residual, a syndication kind of thing, or you want residuals, or his, like he said, his nickel from this IP that he helped, bring going live. That's almost kind of a different conversation in terms of just getting that credit. I think, in terms of credit, why not, be able to credit everyone who had a part in that? I know, if you had to credit every single person who worked on the entire first game, 2 games, and have those entire credits within the credits of the TV show, maybe that's too much. I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert here. I'm not saying everything, has to be done all at once. Maybe that's not realistic, but again, it's unfortunate there. This has to be an issue. Hopefully they can get that worked out. Of course, I'm a big fan of these games and of the show. So hopefully, there's no hard feelings there, and that gets itself worked out. But that being said, I do think we spent some time there. I'm going to move on in a moment here to our next story. And of course, as you see on the docket, not, another story is not, not the most upbeat, but I promise we're gonna get bad news out of the way here first, at the top of the docket here. And they're getting to some new exciting announcements and stuff, but definitely something we're gonna have to discuss here. And bear with me as I pull this up really quickly. And I'm not sure if that marker flipped over or worked when I did that, but here we go. Okay. All right. And that article should be on screen now. So as you're seeing here, some more bad news, unfortunately, for Microsoft. This isn't really getting into the real bad news of the week. This was kind of something I almost forgot about, given the other big story that we're gonna have in a second, just after this with Microsoft. So I'll do this one very briefly, and that is that the European Union, as we've heard recently with some other trade commissions, with of course, with the SEC and a few other countries, were all very, very scrutinous of this Activision Microsoft acquisition here. We see, as I said before, European Union reportedly preparing to challenge this deal outright in the EU. So they are not, they are not liking the optics of this deal. There have been some reports of investigations, both America, both I believe the United Kingdom, I believe some regulators in Brazil have all been very critical specifically on this deal, but none of them have really put down, a full on, challenge to stop it or anything like that. Yeah, we did get that recent action from the UK. I should point that out, but that was more so an investigation and not necessarily them preparing to openly challenge it. So we see now the European Union is submitting a statement of objections, as it says, to Microsoft regarding its acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Sources told Familiar to Matter said that Microsoft is likely to receive an EU antitrust warning regarding its $68.7 billion acquisition of the Call of Duty and World of Warcraft and more, I should point out, publisher, adding to the growing list of organizations raising concerns about the deal. So that's really significant. That's really something. I could talk a lot about this deal. I feel like I already have in many other episodes. So I don't want to waste another like 20 minutes of everybody's time here discussing how I feel about the Microsoft Activision deal, because I feel like that'd be, it's something we've kind of covered a few times here. As much as I'd like to keep everybody up to date week to week, assuming you haven't watched our previous episodes, it's something we've been covering every single week. All I will say was everything I said there is pretty much true. There's been a lot of scrutinization here, and probably not for bad measure. And I'll basically sum up my my in like in layman's terms, what my argument was essentially I wasn't really buying it either. I kind of felt that it was a little bit more of a push in terms of just to acquire, a quick fix for their problems with their management of their IPs and their in-house game studios, rather than I think fixing what's been a long-term problem with Microsoft, Xbox game studios for about 10 years now, I think. And this goes before Bethesda's acquisition. This goes all the way back to, I think, problems with Halo and 343 and Gears of War and different franchises maybe not being where they needed to be. And that being said, I will say here that Microsoft has seemingly maintained its confidence. They said, we're continuing to work with the European Commission to address any marketplace concerns. Our goal is to bring more games to people, and this deal will further that goal. Not sure about that, but we'll see. That being said, I do want to move on here because it's really all it is, just them, fully being challenged by the EU. And we've talked about this deal ad nauseum. So with the real unfortunate bad news for Microsoft this week hasn't even begun yet with that article. It's really what happens here. And as you can see, if you're on the video podcast, Microsoft unfortunately lays off over 10,000 employees this week, including reportedly Xbox, Bethesda, 343, all those studios employees. So very, very sad news there right off the bat. Just, first off, I'm very sorry to hear that for all of those who have been laid off, during these cuts. It's really unfortunate. I think, not only obviously for everyone involved, but also just for the industry in general. I think these are probably positions and probably opportunities, especially for these people, for people that were already in these positions that may not arise again. I've seen a lot of people, comment on how this could be a shakeup for not just thousands of people looking for a new job in the industry, but maybe having to pivot or switch industries just because a large, percentage of this. And I smile not because I find this funny. I think it's really kind of scary almost that I make that face, because it's a large percentage of the industry that is kind of being taken away here, that not only are not opportunities for those who have lost their jobs, now are just kind of, it's up in the air where these studios and where some of these, parts of the industry itself go from here. And maybe that sounds a bit dramatic, but I do think this is a really substantial cut here. And it's not just actually Microsoft. I hate to say it. There's actually 2 or 3 other big layoffs this week that I'm going to mention really quickly after this one. I will briefly discuss what was said here from Microsoft. So we had a comment from CEO Satya Nadella confirming the 10,000 layoffs during what he described as a time of significant change. No saying there. That's for sure. It goes off to say here with about which amounts to less than 5% of the company's total workforce, more than 220,000 employees. It's still around 5%, even if that's less. It's still a good, it's a sizable figure. We see later on in the article here that this is just the latest round of layoffs for Microsoft. Nadella estimated around 25,000 jobs eliminated between 25,000 jobs about almost 10 years ago now, between 2014 and 2015, as a result of abandoning the company's Nokia business. So I'm surprised it's the last time they've had a major layoff at Microsoft. I feel like it may have been sooner. I feel like a year or two ago I may have been hearing something, and maybe I'm mistaken there. But unfortunately, that is the case. I will say, just because I was going to move on to this later on because we have another article for it, but including in the layoffs are also a few other video game companies. I know Riot Games has unfortunately suffered some layoffs this week. Fandom, if you don't know, they now also own, I believe, sites like GameSpot, which I'm reading this article from right now, and I'm very thankful for these video game news sites. Unfortunately was affected by these layoffs. It's really unfortunate to see so many what I think are staples in our industry, be affected by this, and it's I don't know what I'll say on it. It's just really unfortunate. I would love to sugarcoat it or say, hopefully this can improve in the future. But yeah, it's a tough news week for this one. This is a tough one, guys. A lot of probably incredible, hardworking, amazing creative games industry folks have unfortunately lost their possessions this week and may have a hard time recovering from this for some time. It's really a non this is not a not an insignificant event whatsoever. And it's not one of those, it's easy to just think of it as another headline or another, quarterly report or whatever, as someone who's a consumer of games and kind of just reads about what's going on. It's easy to hear that and go, oh man, that stinks. And then kind of move on. But what you don't, we don't really think about, maybe if you're just, thinking about the games or as a consumer, is the human aspect of this. And not only the human aspect, but just how that affects both the livelihoods of all these developers and also the future of the industry and their games in general. So I really do. My heart goes out to everybody affected by these layoffs. I really do mean that. I really do hope that, and this is again not just me saying this to say, I really do hope that going forward, something there is some silver linings here. When any big changes in life, of course for anybody, unfortunately sometimes they say it has to rain before there's a rainbow, or maybe these studios or these divisions being shut down leads to new companies or new groups of people meeting that wouldn't have met, in other circumstances, that create new and awesome things in the gaming industry. So who knows what the future holds here, but I'm wishing everyone nothing but the best there, of course. I will say, in terms of what's left in this article, they did have some more specifics here that I think unfortunately were a bit too vague. I will read this, but I think it is a bit vague, honestly. He says it's important to note that while we're eliminating roles in some areas, we'll continue to hire in key strategic areas. We know this is a challenging time for each person impacted. The senior leadership team and I are committed to as we go through this process, and we will do so in the most thoughtful and transparent way possible. Understandable. Again, I don't think there's any much else to say here. It's just really unfortunate. They made a comment here that actually revolving the pandemic and their spending. He said, as first as we saw customers accelerate their digital spend during the pandemic, we're now seeing them optimize their digital spend to do more with less. We're also seeing organizations in every industry and geography exercise caution as some parts of the world are in recession and other parts are anticipating one. He said at the same time, the next major wave of computing is being born with advances in AI, and as we're turning the world's most advanced models into a new computing platform. So he says he's confident Microsoft will emerge from this stronger and more competitive, and it'll make more strategic investments as it looks to future growth, with AI being one of these pillars, while the company will also divest in other areas, Nadella said. So he also says, again, that's a lot there, but he continues to say these are kinds of hard choices we've made throughout our 47-year history to remain a consequential company in this industry that is unforgiving to anyone who doesn't adapt to platform shifts. Fair enough. The way that sounds, I'm not really arguing with the way that sounds. I will say there maybe could have been, less cutthroat moves that maybe would have resulted in, this major of an action needed to be taking place. So that, they say it is like, while it's unfortunate, we're not afraid to do what we got to do, to push us forward. And maybe it's a little disrespectful here, but for me, I'm thinking, well, maybe we would have had to do something so drastic and so negative and so, largely negatively impactful to tens of, to thousands of people, if certain things would have been handled in different ways from the get-go. I really, I really do think it's unfortunate. And who am I? I am not a business manager. I am not, especially when I watch podcasts online of people, everybody has an opinion, right? Everybody's gonna say, well, back then or back this year in 2017 or 2018, whatever the case may be, we could have done this, we could have done that. And I acknowledge, as someone who's just talking, on a podcast here, I would not like to think that I know better or imply that I am, I had some, 2020 vision, hindsight's 2020, they say, you know what I mean? So it's tough to read that. Of course, an unfortunate situation. They wouldn't be, talking or justifying it if they didn't have to lay off, 10,000 people. So obviously it's a very, you got to take some of those comments with a grain of salt there is really only my point. I'm not trying to, go too aggressive on that there. But that being said, there were a few other things I wanted to cover here. Specifically, I believe it wasn't on this article, but with this story. And I'm going to move over real quickly. I can get this to get out of my full screen. I'm not sure why it's not working. There we go. Okay. So this just continues on. This was directly involving the Halo team over at 343 Industries. I'm just going to take a quick sip of coffee here. and take a breath as we move on into this part of the story. But as it says there on the video, of course, this is directly involved with Microsoft laying off 10,000 of their staff, 10,000 of that staff, not excluding Xbox Game Studios, including Bethesda, 343, potentially other studios that, we're not exactly aware of so far. So we do know Bethesda did take some cuts. We're not exactly sure to the extent, at least personally, to the extent that this happened, what kind of positions and what kind of teams were cut. Was it certain divisions? Was it certain, individuals? We're not exactly sure there on the Bethesda side of things. That being said, we are aware that at 343, things are really not looking good. And you can see I made the Master Chief that thumbnail today for the show because I made one of our thumbnails a few weeks back. Will Halo bounce back? That was the title of the show. And I needed that because I saw some things that I found at least encouraging with Forge mode and some of the new updates and them getting some of these like really, really like lifetime bad bug fixes, with the game finally addressed. That being said, the game had been out for 2 years. We had seen support was dwindling. We had seen like things like these battle pass systems where they had items that were intended for like you could tell it was like Easter themed packs that were intended for like the first Easter after the game launch that were coming out like 2 years later, like in the fall. Like there were things that were just way off kilter that are off schedule, and I really you know, wasn't sure if it was going to bounce back at all. Then we got that winter update. We saw the Forge mode. I said, maybe let me give them the benefit of the doubt. They said they had a 10-year plan here with Halo Infinite. They were supposed to save the Halo franchise and be like, the flagship core game that stuck for the Xbox Series X and was the launch title. And just, I say this again, I don't like to be biased on the channel. Obviously, I do play both Xbox and PlayStation. I have an Xbox and a PlayStation and a Switch and a Steam Deck. I try not to be biased here. I love all games. I play a ton of stuff. But then again, I feel like I can be kind of hard on Xbox on the show sometimes. I'm not going to lie. And I don't think it's because I'm, not a fan or it's because I'm such a PlayStation fan or anything like that. I know there's a lot of, at least especially on the internet, you see what these, like, they call them the console wars. And there's channels that are, that I'm a PlayStation guy, so here's everything Xbox did wrong this week. And I don't want to be like that with you guys. I want to make sure I'm giving you the most unbiased, just like what's going on every week kind of information. But I hate to say it, I gotta be a little negative here, so I'm gonna be, and I'll take that all with that caveat, and with that, I'm not just trying to hate on Xbox here or that I'm a PlayStation fan or anything like that, but it's just been a tough time for them. I really think so. I'm a diehard Halo fan. I used to love Halo when I was younger. I think when I was in like second, third grade, I remember just falling in love with the series. I wanted to get all the Halo action figures. I wanted to play every game. Wanted to go back and get the, I didn't play Halo 1 or 2 originally. I believe Halo 3 was my first game. So I got Halo 2. Then I got Combat Evolved, the remaster at a certain point. I loved Halo. I was obsessed with Halo. So taking that in mind, I as a huge Halo fan, as a former like big Xbox player, because of how much I use the platform for Halo, it was really tough for me to see a lot of this stuff just not go well. I mean, Halo 4 had mixed receptions, similar with Halo 5. Some people said, I thought the gameplay of those games were really great. The world building, they invested a lot in the Halo universe, the narratives. You could tell 343 really put effort there. I appreciated that. There were certain things that were kind of like the core Halo experience that I feel maybe got kind of faded away a bit. That things people would call like the soul of Halo almost. Like I do believe some of that was kind of on the back burner. And as a Halo fan, I was wondering, what's next? Are we gonna like move away from this kind of like new, I'm trying to think of the word there. They kind of had a different vibe for Halo at the time, but Infinite had me hopeful. It really did. That was Halo 6 at the time. We didn't know what it was gonna be called. They announced Halo Infinite. It looked interesting, and just having that gonna be a launch game for the Xbox Series X. Then it wasn't. I started wavering on my feelings about Series X. Then it came out a year later, and it came out buggy and broken with like literally 1 or 2 maps that you could play on, and still was in that state for the next few years. And it was really tough as a Halo fan. It was unfortunate. It was a bummer, like not that I'm owed any, a new Halo game or anything like that. Some people were like, this is, the worst thing in the world. And as a Halo fan, I get it. It stunk, that to not have a game you can go to or have to go back to, rely on the, what they had was the Master Chief Collection, or rely on the original trilogy games to kind of get that fix, of what you wanted to play. And I do think that certain, game series, especially long-standing ones like Halo or even things like Call of Duty, if you think the shooter space, really fall victim to that nostalgia game of like, we think, well, you see it right here. The biggest shooter game right now on the market is Modern Warfare 2, which is a game I originally played back in 2012. So, they're all in on directly rebooting their own, selves and doing what was popular. Because that time when multiplayer was big, Call of Duty multiplayer was big, the Xbox 360, really, the Xbox Live days was when that was all kind of going off on online multiplayer. And I can talk about, PlayStation Network and Steam, of course, but really Xbox Live was what really propelled online gaming, I think, to that level, from like, at least for me. But I really do think that that's the case there. Like that Xbox 360, time, I think was really special in terms of just like the beginning of online gaming. And it's just unfortunate to see them in this state now. So obviously I've been talking a lot about what happened here. If you haven't already realized, if you're listening on, just on audio and haven't seen on screen, we're seeing here that 343 is not in a good place. Joseph Staten, who was then hired post-emptively after Halo Infinite's launch to kind of like bring things back together and get Halo Infinite on track, which he did, to an extent, good extent, has now left, the department. Given the news of what was going on, it seems he probably had some advanced knowledge of this. He has moved back to rejoin Xbox Publishing. He's no longer on any excuse me role. Excuse me, any director role, not excuse me role, any director role here at 343 Industries. But unfortunately, and this is not confirmed, it's not official. Let's take this with a bit of a grain of salt. I have heard from some, people in the industry, people who have, have insiders or know people at 343. It seems like 343 has all, if not been kind of gutted. And I hate to say that. It's really, really, really unfortunate to say this, but it seems that a large majority of their studio has either been laid off, or a large part of their contract work, which took actually a big part of their development work on Halo Infinite. A lot of their contracts have been severed, and they are kind of restructuring their contract work. So again, a lot of this, as I said before, take with a grain of salt, because I'm not aware of like the exact logistics of who and where and what, has been laid off, but we've seen a lot, notably on Twitter from some people I know in the industry and some games journalists, people we've covered in the past that have, push stories that have confirmed that it probably isn't looking great. So my thoughts really go out to everyone at 343. I know I did just give my little, my 2 cents on the Halo industry, but I think that's just because again, I don't think it's because of anyone's individual fault of 343 or anything like that. I really do think, unfortunately, it was a game boggled down by a lot of implications. A lot of things needed to work, both monetarily, management wise, for the future of Xbox. I think it had a lot going on for it, and unfortunately, a lot of games these days fall into these pitfalls when it comes to just, too much going on at once. Constrained timelines, the management wants to get the most profit out of that in that single launch window, but it's just tough these days. Really, games are getting more expensive. They take more work. And that being said, the gamers and the audience wants things faster and better than ever. So it's a very, very demanding time here. It's a tough time for both, publishers, management, developers, any level of the process. It's a very tough thing to perfectly execute a game launch. Don't get that wrong, guys. And I know, when we're in the year of delays, as I've been saying, and you have every game you can think of get delayed to 2023 or have a problem or have an issue, it's easy to say like, what's going on? Or oh, it makes sense because everybody's dealing with the same stuff. And that really is the latter. We're really dealing with some unprecedented times here. I give it up to everybody who's, dealing with these struggles and is still pushing through. But to get us all the stuff that we love and we want to play. So again, it's a bittersweet sentiment there, I guess, was what I'm trying to say, but really, unfortunately, kind of a bitter story here. I don't have much else to sugarcoat here. It's a really tough week for Microsoft, for the tech industry in general. And I said before, it wasn't just Microsoft. I wanted to reiterate here, and I think I do have the articles up on top, so I'll just quickly jump to these. I mentioned before, Fandom as well was another victim of this, and I may have just jumped to an advertisement. Sorry, they threw me to audible.com here. No, thank you, Amazon. I don't want to click on that. But I won't click on that outskirts here. But we are hopping into Fandom here on Variety, who has reported that Fandom, who owns Giant Bomb, gaming media site there, GameSpot, of course. We read a lot of our gaming articles here on the show from Metacritic, actually, as well as TV Guide, who actually was bought out by Fandom at some point in the past as well, are all getting layoffs here. So staff of all of those publications, people that worked on all those publications, are unfortunately having to deal with layoffs here. This is only 4 months after Fandom apparently bought, the entertainment and gaming sites for about $50 million. That they bought all of these, smaller companies here: Metacritic, Giant Bomb, GameSpot, you name it. So unfortunately, multiple staffers of the websites are affected by these job cuts, and they've been posting on social media about it, and that's what people have heard. They said the layoffs affected less than 10% of the company's workforce, they have said, But again, that's still significant. I mean, I'm sure fandom isn't as large as something like Microsoft or Google, which we'll get into in a second. Where 10% or 5% is a huge number. That being said, that's still, 500 employees. That's still a large number. It's not Microsoft level of 10,000 people, but it's still a significant layoff, and it's really unfortunate for everyone there who was affected. And my thoughts go out to everyone who was affected by these. Wishing everybody the best, of course. Um, I wish I could say more here in terms of what's the future of, Giant Bomb and of GameSpot, all these websites. I don't believe anything's going out of business here. I don't think Giant Bomb or GameSpot or anything is going to stop reporting or anything like that. I do think it seems to be a bit of a restructuring. That being said, they said over at Giant Bomb yesterday, it's been a tough day and they're going dark. A lot of the news, totally understandable. Again, thoughts go out to everyone there over at Giant Bomb. It's really a shame to hear this, but I hope everyone there can work it out for the best. I really hope so. That being said, here, not much else to say in terms of this specific deal here. But again, another unfortunate one. And I did want to mention, I know I talked a lot on that Microsoft thing, and I feel like there was something on the tip of my tongue, and I couldn't really get back to it. The one thing I want to say is because it's really, like I said here, I saw what that article noted, said a certain percentage of their company and then you've just acquired and I'm going back to Microsoft here, so maybe I'll flip back over with the article so not to confuse. But still on Microsoft here, you know, to go and acquire Bethesda Game Studios for what 6-7 billion about, and then to have this pending acquisition of about 70 or so billion for Activision Games, it's not the best look when you're going and buying them, and then like 6 months to a year later, firing a good percentage of that staff that you just took on. We actually saw it again. This is a smaller amount of staff. This is a smaller purchase here. Probably cost them way less money than it would have cost Microsoft if they did this. But Sony recently purchased Bungie, and about I want to say 3-4 months later was dealt with that staff issue and actually put in an extra $1 billion into investing and keeping all that staff. And again, I'm before I even get into it, I'm not trying to get into look what Sony could do. And I'm a PlayStation fan here. I'm not trying to just play the Sony same fan side of things here. But they have shown that while I think Sony was kind of behind the ball in some of the things that Microsoft was doing with Game Pass and their acquisitions and the like, I think they've kind of reflexively have kind of fought back pretty smartly there. And I think that was a good move. Bungie seems to have a lot in the works here. We're not sure exactly what those new IPs are that they're cooking up, but Destiny 2 Lightfall is going to do well. Destiny 2 seems to be still performing very well. There's a very large community there who loves, staying up with Destiny. It's one of those games that of live service that really did stick with its community and did have a long-standing live service presence. So got to give a shout out there to Bungie for that. But again, that's not really, just besides the point here. But I think that, it's not a great look for Microsoft, as I said, to be investing so much and then having to, as you're investing, lay off all these people and make a comment of, well, if we can, acquire Activision, this is going to help bring more games to everyone. It's going to help us, manage things, better because we've had this disadvantage with Sony having all these properties or wherever they want to frame it. And I don't really think that's the case. In fact, it seems that they're, again, I said this a lot about the Xbox deal, about how they feel like they're more so making up for the pitfalls they've had with the properties they've had owned the past 10 years. We heard this like 10 years ago when Phil Spencer first started. I think Phil Spencer's done a lot of great things. What Xbox I really think he has in terms of their accessibility, what they've done with Game Pass, with backwards compatibility, with Game Pass itself, getting people, everyone's hands on Xbox. It's been really great in terms of the technology and everything they've done there in terms of the community stuff. It's been awesome. Don't get me wrong there. But at the end of the day, it's really one of those things where it's like you need your exclusive games. As much as we want to say we want to move on from that and everybody could play what they want everywhere. Of course, we all want that. But when you're an owner of a console, you're a Sony or Microsoft, you need to sell your consoles. You need console sellers. You need a specific. This is the game that, oh my god, everybody wants this game. So I gotta get PlayStation because it's here. I gotta get Xbox because it's here. I can't get the other console. I need this game. So it's always been a thing for instance. I feel like the start of the console wars, whenever you want to go back to. But I feel like it's always been like, if I want to get that Atari, I need to have that one game that's only on the Atari. I can't get it on anything else. Like that's what sell consoles. Games sell consoles. They are video game consoles first and foremost. So all this, all the extra stuff is awesome, and I think all the accessibility and things around games aren't great. You do need the games that people want to have access to there as well. You do need to have those games, and you do need. I think you do need to, if you want to compete with Sony and you want to say that they're taking away, and they have all these great IPs, you're going to need to compete there. You can't just, have a platform and hope to get all their IPs as well, but then also just be the place where everybody plays everything. Unfortunately, it seems they're doing well with, their alternative formats. And obviously the console space isn't necessarily the main, breadwinner there at all. Like, consoles actually usually take a loss for the first few years in order to sell, the digital marketplace there. The PlayStation 5 and the Series X were costing more than to produce than they were to sell and ship to consumers. And if you're not familiar with the games industry, you may think that makes no sense, whatever, but that was not their main profit margin. They were making way more money off of every single person that then got that console and then spent $70 or whatever it may be, for all the games on their marketplace. And every single one of those purchases, PlayStation gets their 30% cut if it's third party, or they get all of that cut, if it's a first party PlayStation game. So it's, the digital sales, the game sales, the platform really is the money these days. It's you're selling PlayStation Network, you're selling Xbox Live, or Xbox Game Pass. You're selling the platform now almost. And I think PlayStation is still, and they've made those comments clear, they're very much more married to the console itself and the physicality of it. And we believe in generations. And they said those kinds of stances very clearly. But they're playing the industry too. They have to play where they play the game where they have to here, for lack of a better phrase. You have to get into that PC space with these PlayStation releases, having God of War and Last of Us and these games Horizon come to PC. They're playing around with maybe having a launcher there as well. Live service titles was never really their bread and butter. They're jumping into that full storm just because they feel like they have to have one. And I think they're doing it somewhat intelligently, where they didn't just throw out a random game with like a live service battle pass. It was like, oh, here's our moneymaker here. It seems that they're investing there. So we'll see how those work out. We'll see what they announce. But I feel like a problem for a lot of other studios has been like, hey, let's just churn out. We need a battle arena game with a battle pass. That's what sells right now. We need a Fortnite. We need an Apex, a Fall Guys. We need something like that. And I feel like everybody's trying to be that game. And not everybody can be that game. There's only like one or two or three of like unique types of that game before it just kind of, the industry can get a little, for lack of a better term, bloated with that kind of stuff. You need things that are unique. You need things that are hooks that get people interested in your game being different from others. I think a lot of titles, unfortunately, have gotten caught up with just getting into like, how can we monetize this, and how can we make this a battle pass, and how can we keep this live service, or keep people coming back for months and months on end. And it's like, you can't just worry about, the cosmetic drops for the next couple of months. You need to worry about that base game. Is that gameplay of me going and doing this in an arena and winning, whatever, does that get boring after a month or two? Because I'm not going to really want to keep buying skins for a game that doesn't really keep me engaged month after month. So I feel like a lot of the focus, again, I'm talking very broad strokes here, so I apologize for the tangent I went on here, but I do think overall, like, we have been seeing some unfortunate, management practices here that I think led to a lot of these things being made. We saw what happened with Ubisoft. They're in trouble. They're looking at layoffs next year in the very near future. And we talked about a lot about last week what the management had said about, kind of saying how the staff needs to work harder and really put in a harder work this year. And they got blasted on that this week. Very similarly, Izumo had to put out an apology statement to his staff. They have talked about unionizing and going, and at Ubisoft as well. So it's really, unfortunately, I don't mean to be so negative today. I apologize, but it's, we've had a lot of stories this week about unfortunate management, things not going well for a lot of these large publishers, large companies, both, the console, side of things and the first party side of things, and also in third party, so I hope for the future that these are lessons that are being learned and people are, improving things for the better. I really do. And I'm sorry, that's a lot of what I'm saying. I wish I could say that in a better, more concise way, but I don't have much else to say there, with the knowledge I have of the situation. And I wouldn't, again, want to imply or, I know anything I don't hear, because that's about all I know, as much as I've told you. But again, I've been on this a good enough, I think, here in terms of the negativity. I really, really, feel bad for everyone this has affected. This is a really unfortunate week for the video game industry. No other way to put it. That being said, it was also, I said tech as well before. I heard we got layoffs not only in Microsoft, but also in Google as well. I believe was around 5 to 8% of their company was laid off. I saw that headline online. I thought that was very upsetting as well. Actually, a friend of mine who works at Google, I immediately went to go send a text, and I had a text. I'm all good. My job is safe. Thankfully, so I was shout out to my friend Garrett. Thankfully, he has his position still. I was very happy to hear that. But I feel very bad for everyone who does not. It's tough. It's very tough, industry these days, especially. And I really just, I hope that for everyone who is, who is working hard, is passionate about what they do. Like, I really hope all the best that you can find your footing somewhere else and that everything works out there. But yeah, that's about all I could say. I want to say it over and over because I'm not sure how else, what else I can do here to help him. Else, I do feel, it's just a tough situation, guys. I hate to say it, but that being said, I think we are going to move on here because we do have a lot other stuff to talk about. Some, it's a little more uplifting. So I think we're gonna get on to the next story on the docket here. But again, my heart goes out to everybody who's been affected by all these major layoffs across the industries this week, and hopefully, brighter days tomorrow. I really do hope so, guys. So that being said, I am going to move my docket over here, and we are going to hop into something that was it's a little different here. This is more entertainment news here. This is no more not more logistical. This is kind of interesting here. This one is about Dead Space, actually. So as I pull this up, we see here John Carpenter, who is a very famous horror director. I joke a lot on the show. We talk about horror films and horror games. I'm not the biggest horror guy myself. That being said, I do, I guess I do love, like some zombie stuff like The Last of Us and things like that. I get my horror, fixes in there here and there. But I'm typically I'm usually not the biggest like gory horror kind of person. I tend to like not really delve into a ton of that kind of content. That being said, I said that a lot because we've been talking a lot about Dead Space and the Callisto Protocol and that all that good stuff as these two games release pretty closely here in December and January. That being said, someone was interviewing the legendary horror film director John Carpenter. I believe this was at a I'm not sure if this was a film event, a New York film event. I'm not sure where he was interviewed here. If they even told us, but it was an interview with Variety, so it was entertainment interview. And they asked him about his past remarks about wanting to make a Dead Space film. So apparently in the past he had said he had wanted to. He's a big Dead Space fan. And he had said that while he backpedaled on the idea that he might be involved, he did let it slip that there may be another director working on that. So what he had said was, quote, "I'm a big video game fan, so I played all the Dead Space games. I was down looking at the new digital cameras, the red cameras, which is a really, really nice. I actually got to use a red camera once before in film school. It was very, very nice cameras. He said he happened to mention to them that I would love to do a Dead Space film. That just went around and everybody said, "Oh, when are you going to do it?" And he said, "I'm not going to do it. I think they already have another director involved and they haven't asked me to do it. So until someone asks me, I wouldn't do it. But there's a new version of the Dead Space video game coming out in January, so I'm all there." So that was the quote from John Carpenter here. What he may not have been aware of is no one outside of the film industry was aware of any Dead Space film that was like in production or being talked about. So he kind of did let slip there. There is a director in talks. There is apparently some talks here with the owners of the IP, maybe EA and some film studios or some people in the business to shop this film script around, or maybe it's being written right now. Who knows? But that is an active film idea, script, whatever it may be, in Hollywood right now for a Dead Space movie. And John Carpenter kind of just let that slip here. So everybody's a little interested. If you're a Dead Space fan, of course, it's probably interesting to you. And I think the more we're talking about adaptations, we always talk about the video game curse. People are always worried about. That's the one thing I see with The Last of Us all over right now is how it broke the video game curse. And it's like I've seen that with a few other shows that did pretty well. Most maybe not notably Halo. We talked about Halo earlier. I've had a tough time with my Halo franchise in the past few years, unfortunately. But there have been other. I know a lot of people were big fans of Arcane on Netflix. League of Legends fans, I should note. It's one thing I did note. About 2 minutes ago with those layoffs at Riot Games. I'm just kind of jumping back here. We're all over the place today. They also, the League of Legends developers, have reportedly gone through some layoffs this week. We just had this tweet here. So again, all allegedly that the size and scope are unclear at the moment, but I've heard efforts across recruiting, human resources, support, and esports all may have been affected there. So that's what we're hearing from this journalist here on Twitter. So again, same statement there. My condolences to everyone affected by these unfortunate layoffs. But yeah, it just goes to show it's not an easy. Maybe I sounded a bit harsh before about the decisions and things being made. It's not an easy time to be in the industry right now. I think there is a lot going on, a lot of investment in new things like the metaverse and like certain ideas, and certain live service, and a lot is going on with certain companies where people are understandably apprehensive to really jump in aggressively on certain new goals or new products when the market can be very volatile at the moment. I think, at least from what I see, the way the speed of the internet, the way the news cycle moves, the way marketing cycles move, it's a very, very complicated time these days, and marketing has become more important than ever. I think, in terms of like how to hit certain beats in certain time periods. And the certain wrenches can get thrown into these times. It happens all the time. There's just it's a very, very different day now with time at time now with marketing and just the speed of which the broken, but more not really. These stories break, more so get leaked the day before they really break. So that's really the case with most games news stories. It's always a leak and then the official announcement. The leak, the official announcement. Unfortunately for developers who would rather probably announce their things when they want to announce them. It's unfortunate that's usually the case. But that being said, it's typically how we see things go a lot of the time here in the games industry. But that being said, we are going to move on a good amount here to our next article here. Bear with me as I move over my docket and mess with this on my end for a second. And we're actually talking a bit more about Activision here before with Call of Duty. So we've talked about Call of Duty in the past a good bit here. Of course, we're talking about Modern Warfare 2. We talked a bit about in the past their delays, how specifically certain modes weren't releasing when the game came out. I was a little upset because I love the hardcore mode, or they call it the tier 1 mode now, Call of Duty. I'm more of a fan of that. Those kind of games, I'm more a fan of I guess you would call it Twitch shooters, where it's like you kind of like if you get the jump on somebody, like you win that battle, versus like something like Halo or COD, even. But Halo's like an extreme example where it's like you get a long battle shooting through somebody's shields, and it's like really about who wins that firefight, versus like something like Counter-Strike Go, where it's like you're going around a corner and boop, that I won that fight because I saw him first, like that kind of difference there. I usually typically lean towards the faster gameplay when I play shooter games. So I was a little bummed when the new Call of Duty came out that that they didn't have a lot of that mode and a lot of other modes that I feel like should have been kind of, at launch. So unfortunately, we see here season 2, which is still planning on adding a lot of like the bug fixes, UI fixes, a lot of things that still haven't been added since launch. It's now being delayed as well. So it's supposed to come on February 1st. In about a week or two here. Now coming about 2-3 weeks, about a month away or so, a little less than a month away. So hopefully that'll enable them to get a little extra time here, get it going. But unfortunately, I did want to point this out. They've been on this same delay schedule now for no exaggeration, maybe 3-4 years. I'm trying to think back to Modern Warfare 2019. Their first season was delayed, and then their second season was delayed to mid-February, I believe. Same thing with Call of Duty. I'm not sure if it happened with Black Ops Cold War, but Call of Duty Vanguard, exact same thing. Season 2 was delayed. It's going to come out beginning of February, then was delayed like February 18th, February 15th of that year, last year. So again, it seems like a recurring delay that they're kind of always like 2-3 weeks behind on. Barring like that couple week crunch, I'm sure probably happens when everybody needs to get everything together for the Call of Duty launch, when everyone across Activision is getting all of those working pieces, working in one form. Honestly, to be honest, I think it is almost a miracle that it all does work together the way they even get it working with the stability that it does have with how people work on that game, how much goes into it, and all that hard effort from all these different other studios across the world, like putting in these little different aspects. It's impressive that they actually do. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of budget and a lot of manpower going into that, but it's impressive still that they're able to pull that off with all those moving pieces and everything, So I do get a little bit of, a slack there that I understand that game development is very different, now. I was saying that a lot today. It's very different. It's a lot more complicated maybe than it used to be 10, 15 years ago at certain things. I do understand that. And in any case, it's certainly more expensive. So I think, I understand why, especially with COVID and with all these kind of long-standing technology and, just industry kind of delays we've had because of a lot of certain implications like that. We're in a little transition here. I said it all year last year on the Endless Report. That was the transition year. We're out of 2022. I'm trying to stop saying it. We're out of the year of delays. We're out into the year of releases, right? So there's still a lot to get excited here for. But just another delay from COD that's kind of in, I was expecting this. This was another one that I was not surprised about at all. I was like, it's coming February. Yeah, we'll see. Are they got any new maps? What's happening? I'm just more like, yeah, let me know. Let me know when that gets finished. Not that I'm, mad about it or anything. I'm very, I do enjoy Call of Duty when I do hop on that game. But I do feel like I would love, some of the newer content. It seems that unfortunately, I feel like there was a little left to be desired from what was promised at launch. They promised all these multiplayer maps from the original Modern Warfare 2 game that still haven't been added. There's just a few things that are just like the things that kind of sold me on the game. Unfortunately, since I'm not really a big Warzone player, the things that kind of sold me were all these kind of nostalgic, kind of here's your old maps and the multiplayer, and a lot of that really still hasn't been delivered yet. So that's why I'm for someone who paid $70, something that said it would be there, or oh, sorry, it isn't here day one, even though we told you it was here when you didn't pre-order it, you bought it. I specifically didn't pre-order this game to make sure these things were here. People said they were. So then I bought the game, and they were like, "Oh, we're having trouble here. We're gonna take this stuff down. We're gonna take this down for a week. I'll be back in a month or two." It's kind of frustrating when you pay $70 of your own, hard-earned money to a product that then says, you know what, it's actually not the product we said it was. And maybe I'm being a little too critical here, but I do think transparency is key. I'm not a big fan of like really manipulative like pre-order bonuses or things that are just false advertising in general. You see a lot with like review embargoes when some games they don't want any reviews coming out until like the day of or the day after the game releases because they don't want any negative press. There are some red flags there sometimes you don't see them, but again, I just want transparency. That's all that's all we really ask. And I think, I think like with situations like this with Call of Duty, it's like that is a lot to deliver. Maybe too much to even promise. So if we could kind of like maybe change our expectations a little bit as as an audience, maybe as well. Maybe we need to adjust ourselves a bit, as a gaming audience. I'm speaking more towards, like to adjust what we expect, in this AAA perfect, high quality, high fidelity at this rate of speed, we have to change our expectations here maybe a bit. But I do think that there are other things that, again, there's a lot of focus on getting these live service elements out. I feel like that, like, could have benefited from getting the core gameplay and the elements and the UI and just like the quality of life features better and better first. Then you can build on your live service. And I think other games have realized that. Games like Grand Theft Auto or Destiny or other games, like they have really strong live service platforms that enable them to be like, all right, here's this new season with new cosmetics and content and vehicles and weapons and what have you. And it doesn't feel like you're like waiting for that to happen or you're like investing in this long-term thing because you already feel like if you bought like for me, who bought Destiny 2 in the beginning and then didn't buy all the expansions, I still feel like I got a good amount of money's worth out of it. I mean, I had, a good amount of content and then I was, whether I was willing or not to, I could have continued on this saga of this live service game. So I don't mean to be anti-live service or anything like that. I think, in fact, it's probably a big part of the future of our industry, if not one of the biggest parts of the future of our industry. I just think that there are certain ways you can go about it. And I think at the end of the day, it's like we say at Endless, it's finding the fun, right? You find the thing that gets engaging, find the thing that whatever it is, we're being honest here. If it's the thing that hooks people and gets them to come back, spend more money on your platform, be engaged with your platform, give the people what they want, then find that gameplay that's hooking and engaging. Let people create what they want and play what they want. And a game that, there are games like that people just are unique games that people always want to come back to because they do. And that's natural. And that's the kind of, I think, live service you'd want to be. You'd want to be something where it's like, hey, look what we're doing new this month. You don't have to invest, right now if you don't want to, but whenever you come back, look at all the new stuff that we're continually adding and improving. And I think that's live service can be awesome for stuff like that. So I don't mean to be like I know I can sound kind of negative in certain practices on, when I'm talking about certain topics, but I do think it's just about like, the way we see it here and the way we frame it. And I feel like Call of Duty, they have a very unique position here where they are, on top of the world kind of when it comes to the audience they have and, the abilities they have to do whatever they want to do going forward. And I think that while they probably struggle, as I would probably too if I was on that team, do we lean into the nostalgia factor with more, more games like that? Do we do something incredibly brand new and risk getting like backlash when we did a few years back when we changed the movement systems and like things like that? It's a tough position to be in when you have this monolith type, IP and you want to keep everybody happy while keeping things fresh and new so people aren't complaining that you're stale, but also not going too fresh and new that your old fan base is like, hey, what are you doing? This isn't, what I want to be playing. It's a balancing act. It's a tightrope act. So I give credit to like, I don't mean to be so critical here. As I said before, I'm just some guy commenting on the results, right? It's a very, very tough thing to plan these things out and have them work perfectly on a colossal global scale. Don't get me wrong, right? So I hope that, maybe they can get out of this cycle here. I want to see more of, that content they talked about in the past. I think that'd be great. I want to see more of the Modern Warfare 2 kind of stuff and them just, kind of solidifying these core, like they said, these bug fixes, these quality of life fixes, getting the Call of Duty competitive league going. I know it's a big deal for a lot of the competitive players. It's a big business for esports competitive players that they've been waiting on for months. That, that affects their livelihood, to a large extent. So when Call of Duty, doesn't say when those things are coming out, they're releasing delayed, things like that matter. So I'm not saying that, look, delays aren't acceptable. It should never happen again. Of course, like things happen. I get it. But I think in the long run, like people, I mean, I've seen people on Twitter who are in the Call of Duty community saying this is the fourth game in a row this has happened where it hasn't been at launch. Like, can you please make this a priority for launch or whatever there, whether it's competitive series, whether it's certain features. People have said that a lot about certain things. And I think, when you have that kind of franchise and that kind of, that kind of money and the kind of power to have multiple studios doing a lot of things at once, I think it is worth, starting with like the core complaints, then moving from there, and I think there's a lot of things that maybe could be addressed there. But that's just my 2 cents on that. I hate to say it, we have another, unfortunately, slightly bittersweet, kind of not really bittersweet, kind of a sad one on the news today as I move over our docket, and that is of course the end of Google Stadia for once and for all. We did talk about this a little further back on a previous episode when we first announced that Google Stadia was going to be no more at a certain point. Of course, that was happening in, I believe, late January. They said, of course, because it did happen, and it's late January. So here we are. Here is the headline you see. Stadia officially shuts down as of Wednesday. Some games were already not playable as of earlier this week. I did see as of Wednesday night, the service actually was still up very briefly. So I do think they were just kind of like, fixing servers, slow rollout of just kind of taking everything down slowly. So I did see, I will say shout out, I believe it was Tom Warren, Xbox, tweeted, someone who tweets, talked about Xbox. He had shown that off. But that being said, Stadia is no more. Speaking of Xbox, it's a big competitor to Game Pass, kind of being knocked out of the ring there in terms of the competition. Unfortunately, Stadia did have some issues in terms of getting traction. A lot of people did say it was the best in terms of like the quality of the cloud streaming, even over Game Pass or like what some other platforms like GeForce Now and Nvidia and some other platforms have had. So that was one thing that was very much going for Stadia. Just unfortunately didn't really have, I guess, the right moment, right? It didn't really have the right moment in time. I wouldn't say this publicity or anything was terrible or anything like that. It was more just that maybe we weren't exactly ready, as a consumer base, as a populace, to really hop directly into straight to streaming gaming just yet. I feel like it did take some time. I think we're still kind of getting people wrapping their heads around that concept with Game Pass and some other thing, and with even PlayStation and Remote Play and some other stuff. So very unfortunate for fans of Google Stadia. I will say the one silver lining here, if you do own the Google Stadia controller, I know a lot of people were actually a fan of their controller. They said even if they didn't play Stadia games, they end up using their controller or trying to use their controller wired or like messing with it so that it would work with like other control screens on PC because they really like the not, I shouldn't say haptics, more so just like the tactile feel of the controller. Very, very nice ergonomics is really the word I was looking for there. That being said, they officially, as of this week, Google has now made the Stadia controllers unlocked. So previously they were kind of like somewhat tied to Stadia usage. They were kind of hard to use on their own. Now there's officially, you can go online and download like the Bluetooth update from Google to officially convert your Stadia controllers that are now defunct, as Stadia controllers anyway. So then now you can fully kind of convert them to be a fully functional Bluetooth controller that has Bluetooth reception and can connect to anything like an Xbox or PlayStation controller with, whatever you want, your Steam Deck, your laptop, your PC, your console, whatever it may be. Maybe I may have to look into the console. I'm not sure about PlayStation, Xbox there. I'm not 100% on that one, but it's good that they did that. I like that they opened up the Stadia controller. A lot of people are fans of the Stadia controller, so it's nice that they have that option. I'm trying to scroll through the Stadia video they had here. I'm not sure if they had it. Looked like they had a little clip of it. Yeah, right there. I just missed it. Sorry, guys. Just so I can give you a little bit of that visual representation of the controller I was talking about. But yeah, it's okay. At the end of the world, just kind of an aside anyway. But that being said, of course, rest in peace to Google Stadia. Very unfortunate, that we don't get to see it again. But hopefully, we'll see something similar in the future. I'm curious to see what Google's next jump into gaming will be. Again, very unfortunate for those who were laid off at Google this week. My condolences to everyone there as well. As I said, with Microsoft and everybody else, of course, just very, very tough situation there. My condolences. But that being said, I believe if you're a Stadia owner, this article I'm reading here is saying that you may be able to recover some things. I think as of my show, though, and I hate to say it, you may not be able to do so. That being said, I'm not sure how many of you watching now are Stadia owners. Maybe none of you, but that. So maybe it didn't, it wasn't like anybody missed out or anything here, but on this report. But unfortunately, Stadia owners don't really have access anymore. It seems like probably by now, at this time on Friday, they probably have fully kind of torn down all those connections there and really shut down all those servers on the Stadia side of things. So I put jokingly, their RIP to Google Stadia. You will be missed. It was a very interesting, I think, time in gaming history, a very interesting concept, something that really, while it failed, I still think was like a proof of concept. I don't think, Google, while Google has done many, things that test that don't really make it a market, or, this is one of those things where it's like kind of like the Google Glass, where it's like, it wasn't that it wasn't a cool thing or that shouldn't have happened. Just really, we really weren't there yet, Like I think AR still has a ways to go in terms of really being functional in a convenient way that's cheap and accessible to the to populace at large. Stadia, I think cloud gaming is 100% part of our future. It will be the way majority of probably people who game play. I think people like me who are more like, I need that like lowest latency time, and if you're like competitive, or if you're kind of like me and you just want the best specs because you just want the best experience. You don't have to worry about latency, even if it's like even if the latency was non-existent, it was a perfect streaming. I'm still like, I want that wired connection. I want no discrepancies, whatever. So I'm sure some people are like that, like me. There are people like that, for different types of things, like with physical games. Like I eventually made the jump to digital downloads. Some people are like, no, I need that disc. I cannot, I don't want anyone taking that disc away from me. And I totally get that. I'm still kind of the same way, and I kind of like, kick myself for not being as like of like an archivist when it comes to like keeping all of my stuff as organized with all. I almost think about getting game cases. I've seen other people do, where you'll get, go online and buy empty game cases and then print out covers for all your collection, so you can have a physical representation of everything you have, digital or not. And I think that's just really cool. I love the idea of collecting games and video game history. And like I said before, like preserving these things for time, I think is really, really important. Like any other, like literature, or film or any other art form, it deserves to be, put in history and catalog. So I think when it comes to like, anything with stuff like this, it's unfortunate. It's like, well, obviously I can't expect Google Stadia to just run their servers forever unsuccessfully just because I want it to be there. I do think hopefully Google acknowledges it. It's not like something that's kind of like thrown to the wayside or like or forgotten thing, because I do think that it's a very notable part of gaming history in general. So that's my stance on Stadia. I wanted to give it a little bit more of a proper send off than just bye bye. But I really think it's a very cool, interesting, innovative product. Maybe it was a little ahead of its time. But that being said, goodbye to Stadia. There, I guess we'll move on here to our next article. We are over an hour here today, so I'm going to say hopefully we get done under 2 hours, say probably an hour and a half. We're gonna try to wrap up these next few a little more rapidly here today. That being said, hopping over here on the docket as I move everything else over on my end. But I'm curious if you all have, again, if you have any comments, questions, concerns on this, or if you have any of your, a lot of these are kind of, very subjective, interesting discussion kind of topics here. So if you guys have any interesting thoughts, or what you think about these companies or a lot of the layoffs this week, what's been going on in the industry, I'd love to hear from you in the comments, or even on the Discord channel if you're watching this later. Send me a message in the Endless Discord, in that chat, in that off-topic chat. I love talking about the industry, you guys, what everybody's playing, what we're interested in. So definitely feel free to send me some comments over there. That being said, I will actually get that up on screen now and throw this over here. So as you saw in the doc before, cross console chat finally, question mark, I wrote because we are finally getting more and more updates on that Discord update for PlayStation. And again, this may sound a little biased because I'm a PlayStation 5 player pretty primarily, or in terms of when I'm doing console gaming, when I sit down on the couch to console game, primarily on my PS5. And for a long time, cross console chat, which is not possible. We talk about this a lot, how nowadays we have so many games like Rocket League, or I say Rocket League because to give it credit, because it was one of the first cross platform games I could think of, like back like 3-4 years ago, when there was like not many games doing that at all. Rocket League was one of the first, so I do want to mention it, even though it's maybe not the most notable at the moment. But anything, Fortnite, of course, Call of Duty, any of these these huge games, ML, sports games, especially like Madden, FIFA, and MLB The Show now even isn't a PlayStation exclusive anymore. These are all games that, while it's great you can now cross play, you couldn't cross chat with your friends. So if you had a friend on Xbox and you're on PlayStation, you were either making a Discord chat on your phone or on your laptop and talking with one earbud in there whenever you're out here, or you had a FaceTime or a phone call or a Snapchat, whatever you guys were doing to figure out how to talk on another secondary platform. And I've had to do that a lot, with my friends who had Xbox or just didn't have, or on PC. Or most notably, my brother and mine also had a PlayStation. We had got PlayStations, and he switched to Series X. He wanted to play like some games there, some friends there. And it kind of stunk, because now I was like, oh man, now we can't have our party chats though, regardless. Even if we wanted to play MLB, or because we like to play MLB The Show, I couldn't play that. We could, but we wouldn't be able to talk to each other. But now with this PlayStation 5 update, we may finally get that Discord update directly integrated into the consoles, which is huge. So we talked about this a lot on the show, how PlayStation announced this. They bought a whole, not the whole company, but they bought a sizable portion of Discord and invested in Discord and had a partnership with them there. So clearly we're investing in Discord as a company, and we're happy to be on board with them there. And then a few months back, I want to say this was November, October-ish, Xbox just out of nowhere just announces out of the shadows, just bam, Discord is on Xbox coming next week to the Xbox beta program. And I was like, whoa, 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 where is the PlayStation version? They said they invested in them. They said it was coming over a year ago, but more news soon. And now, over like a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years after the initial announcement from PlayStation, it's finally supposed to come in this 7.00 update that's supposed to be around March, maybe like end of February next month. So thankfully, this is not just good news for PlayStation fans because we're still waiting. What this basically means is now, the cross chat dilemma is over. So this is news for both PC and Xbox players as well. Because now, yeah, great, you had your Discord app or your Discord integration on the Xbox, but you still can't talk to your PlayStation friends or whatever who are in your Discord games anyway. So now, now that we all have it unlocked, we can all be on our home console or place, PC or wherever we're, our home station, wherever we are, and be able to talk through our Discord servers, make a server with our friends, or game server, or the endless studio server maybe, whatever you have, and you could all chat from different platforms and play games together, which I think is really, really cool. So again, we're not exactly sure when this update's coming out. Someone said March 8th, 2023 is the scheduled one for this full firmware update. Though I heard from others that I kind of said it, a little haphazardly, take that with a grain of salt there, because I've heard from others that the beta releases maybe come out even earlier February. You can even opt in here to like the earlier releases of the software if you want to get that and try using it before March. But that being said, we'll have to wait and see exactly when this goes. But I think like minimum, like the final, like latest date this was probably planned for is March 8th. I don't think it's going to go past that. That being said, it's been long known. They said in their article, of course, it's been long known that Sony has wanted a closer link between PlayStation and Discord. Back in May 2021, they announced a partnership where they invested in the company. And they say our teams are already hard at work connecting Discord with your social and gaming experiences on PlayStation Network. They want to bring the two platforms together by allowing friends, groups, and communities to hang out, have fun, and communicate more easily while playing games together. So that's great. I don't think there's any much else to be said from Sony or from Discord on this, other than just like, great, let's go get on that PlayStation. I can't wait to be able to talk to all my friends that are on PC or Xbox. I don't have to worry about pulling my phone out and get a Discord server on my phone and then putting like my headphones in. So I can be like, it's always something stupid. I always have to do something like crazy, like little like switching my audio in this ear and then putting in another mono, switching this audio to mono and then putting it in my right earbud on this other set of headphones. It's always a little bit of like a makeshift kind of thing going on. I can't wait to like not have to worry about that. Have all our games and all our friends in just one place. I think it's a no-brainer for Discord. A great get for Discord. It really solidifies himself as the center of like gaming. What's the word? Just networking in general. You think of TeamSpeak, and it's gonna bother me that I'm forgetting my original. What was that one program that we used to use? Whatever the case might be. Whatever, like I know there were others, Skype or TeamSpeak, whatever you were using for PC gaming. A lot of people use different chat platforms. They just talk to their friends. Of course, Xbox Live parties, and then back in the day, of course, on console, that didn't really have the same exact thing there. But Discord really took that that niche market of like having gaming chat platforms, and they really hit it out of the park. I think the last few years, it really has been nothing but Discord. And now they're just, instantiating themselves as part of the ecosystem of the major, game public, first party game consoles. Goes without saying that like Discord is becoming the hub for gaming, chatting, and community space. So that's awesome. We love to see that. For Discord, we love our Endless Studios Discord as well. But that being said, I'm looking forward to March. Or you have to wait and see when this comes out and when this releases. But definitely looking forward to that. Being able to chat with everyone there on Discord. That being said, I'm going to hop over again and we will switch to our next story on the docket. This one, some good news for Microsoft. I love this, like all the way at the end of the show, because I wanted to give us one good piece of news. This was actually yesterday, and then we got a good piece of news from PlayStation just later on the same day, actually. So we're going to do both of those here at the end of the show and kind of end it up on a great, much better, more positive note. Excuse my voice cracking there. Great positive note after this kind of what's the word? Dour kind of show. Kind of a little bit of a bummer here, but here we go with Redfall. So we talked a bit about Developer Direct happening very soon, January 25th, I believe. That's next week. So I believe it's next Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it might be actually after. Oh, no, next Wednesday. So it's next Wednesday, January the 25th. Okay. But very, very soon. and we may have gotten our first leak, unfortunately, as this looks like from the showcase, and that is, of course, for Redfall, the first big game coming from Bethesda after the acquisition. It's, of course, not Bethesda Game Studios, not to get confused with, who some of you may associate with Bethesda in terms of Fallout and Skyrim. That's Bethesda Game Studios coming out with Starfield, which is assumedly coming, spring, June. We're not sure yet. We're still looking at that. But this is from, of course, Arcane, from Prey, Dishonored, Deathloop, great, awesome, first person, narrative developers. They're coming out with Redfall very, very soon. I feel like this game has been kind of like a low profile. Maybe it hasn't been, the most marketed game. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this as much as some other Xbox, IPs, though. I think they're probably going to have to ramp up the marketing here. That being said, as you saw, if you're a video watcher, it's just right here, Redfall to launch on May 2nd. Boom, that's our release date right there. That's the first time we got anything like that from any of these Xbox games, or really PlayStation either, or Nintendo for that matter, in some time. So this is someone who apparently, again, I don't like to give too much credence to leakers. That being said, this was a tough one to avoid this week because it's all over the place. Everybody was talking about the release date. And it's nothing like, it's no leaked gameplay footage or anything like that. So I don't feel like we're leaking anything in terms of like spoilers or anything like that. Of course not. But someone said if there was any doubt, Redfall can now 100% be confirmed with a release date of May 2, 2023. This can't pronounce that leaker's username tweeted after a fellow insider, Brad Sands, posted a pair of cryptic tweets hinting at Arcane's upcoming game. So that's basically just some commenting on this insider here, saying he since deleted his tweets leaking the game, but they contained emoji that read Redfall 2nd of May before they were removed. More official details on Redfall will be revealed in Microsoft's Developer Direct, of course, on January 25th, which is less than a week away from now. So obviously we'll discuss this next week. I'll discuss next week that the actual release date, whether it was May 2nd or not. Maybe we'll get some gameplay, but we'll clarify on the next episode 41. We're going to clarify that. So stay tuned. But that is happening next Wednesday. And apparently, according to Xbox and Bethesda's YouTube and Twitch channels, they're going to present big features and extended gameplay showcases on these upcoming titles, including Redfall here. So very much looking forward to discussing that next week. We're going to have a very much more interesting, entertaining, exciting new endless report next week with all these new game announcements. That being said, I do want to close up our show today with our last story there that you may see on the docket. And that is, of course, as I pull this over here, Sony with their PlayStation VR 2. So again, I've been talking about this almost every episode past few weeks because since January, they've been in full marketing mode. It comes out February here. So they've been discussing PSVR 2. They've been hands-on. We talked about it last week. They got hands-on with Palmer Luckey, who was the original Oculus founder, and got him to share his thoughts online. And that was a PlayStation blog post. Now you're seeing Sony finally confirm all those games they were talking about. So they had said that we had talked about on the show, there will be 30 full launch games for PlayStation VR 2. We got about, I want to say, 15-ish or so games that were being talked about sporadically. Some games a lot of them already on PC, of course, which is understandable. There are some great, VR PC games right now. We want to get right onto the, port it onto the PSVR immediately, which is great. And some new ones as well. But I'm going to go through this list here, of course, as you can see on the screen. We have this huge visual they made. I think it's great. I'm going to avoid doing that whole Zoom thing here because it's a little wonky with these article websites when I'm full screen. But that being said, just that, first glance, not even looking into anything really. Of course, we see everything we see before with like Gran Turismo, No Man's Sky, The Walking Dead, Retribution in that game. I don't see, unless I'm mistaken, I don't see Beat Saber here actually, which is interesting because they did announce that would be coming at some point. I guess it's not a launch window game. It's going to be, some point in the near future. Every game here, like it says here, launch window lineup is coming up within the first 30 days, I believe. So by the end of March, all these games should be released if I'm reading that correctly. That being said, I'm going to scroll through because they actually get in depth here with the full list, which is nice. Maybe we'll check back on that later in case I miss anything here. Then also they kind of have some like notable shout outs. And maybe I was looking at the wrong article, but I did think they had a scroll of like notable game shout outs here. Maybe they deleted that, interestingly. But when I had this article yesterday, they did have like, game by game, and it had I figured out the screenshot now. There we go. We're back to it. But I did have, description, some notes from the developers. So I'm not sure why that's the case. Maybe I think I need to go to that PlayStation blog post. That might be what it is. I didn't have that official blog post up here. Yeah, we don't need that. We don't need that other article here. So there we go. So this is what I was looking for. So starting off, they reiterate Gran Turismo 7. which I thought was a really exciting one from last night of the announcement. And what's great about here is that they like to confirm that not only is it still free for everyone who already purchased Gran Turismo, they're confirming that upgrade track. They're also confirming that it takes full advantage of PSVR 2's next gen features with the eye tracking and the foveated rendering. It's also fully encompassing the entire game. So there's nothing, it's not like a VR version with certain tracks, certain cars. It's like you can go in and play Gran Turismo just as you are and play those realistically on the and race on those tracks, as they probably are kind of in real life. I mean, I think I said it on last show, I'm not even a super big racing guy. I'm considering getting a racing wheel and pedals and like learning how to drive these circuits, like, because you can almost really fully learn how to, drive almost a real car with some of these racing sim games. I think it's just super cool. You see like some famous F1 drivers and stuff. They have their incredible racing rigs with like PC setups and stuff. And I think that stuff is really interesting. Really just I love the idea of like being immersed in anything like that. That's why I love gaming. Like the immersion factor for me is super cool. So to hear about this VR, like imagine like having my hands on the actual steering wheel and looking around and you're racing. I mean, that's really cool. So hearing it's the entire game, I should note, albeit the split screen mode. That's the one thing you can't do in VR is do 2-player split screen, which I guess makes sense. That being said, of course, unless you have like one player on like the TV, I guess maybe, and then one was using the headset, they probably can't run both at once. It's probably the reason. But again, that's totally understandable. But they said everything else in the game, all the core features, the multiplayer races, you can race real people online, all like the circuits and the tracks, all there. So very, very cool news to hear that about Gran Turismo. But not much else to say on here. This one was called Before Our Eyes. I do want to briefly play this trailer in the background as I discuss this. And the reason it's called Before Our Eyes is because, again, they're using a lot of that eye tracking technology here as like a core tenet of their gameplay. So what I've heard from this game, again, it's very briefly read the description, is that you're reading all of these I think you read a book or you start off like in your own place and you start taking this voyage throughout your own memories and dreams. And so as you look around and you see, as you see here on screen, it looks very cool. I see all these memories and kind of people appearing. I very much like the art style there. It uses your eye tracking to follow. So you see like that little snap there with a circle and this lines. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but you actually are using your eyes to command the story. So I'm looking around, I'm going, oh, over here, and just kind of blinking. I want to go here, and it's taking you. So you're not using just like, I think people have using a point to click controls and VR before. You may be familiar with those. This is more so just like you don't really need you're fully hands off essentially, unless I'm misinterpreting this, and you could just guide instead of you like looking at some place saying, oh, I want to go there, clicking, and then gets that latency and it goes there. You're just looking, blinking, and you're just moving. So it kind of adds this fluidity to it that I think is probably a very interesting effect that I'm sure it feels very interesting to be in and like living and seeing different content in that way. One game I'm not that has not included here. I'm just thinking about now that should be a VR game for sure is that Radiohead Kid Amnesia thing they did for PlayStation 5. It's kind of like a walking museum of all their albums and and the different songs and scapes for different soundscapes, different rooms. And I think that'd be a game where it's very much you're looking around and things. That game has mechanics where you look at there's one room, I don't want to spoil too much, where there's these papers all over the wall. And if you look at certain parts of the wall, papers will start like flying around and spiraling and circling you as the player. And they're all based on like, triggering certain like looking mechanics and walking into certain spaces. So like things like that could be really interesting in VR. And I think like they should continue to port more and more of these interesting PlayStation first person games, I think, into VR editions. That'd be really cool. That being said, I want to move on here. We had Kayak VR Mirage. Very, very cool, I thought. Just gonna briefly show this. Not much else to say about it. You're pedaling a kayak. You can do races with your friends. If they also have this kayak game on their PSVR, which I guess I'm not sure how many people are gonna have this headset and also have a friend that has the headset and is gonna kayak with them. That's what I was thinking. I was watching the trailer. I'm like, oh, that seems really relaxing. But who's gonna kayak with me? I was like, I'm not sure if I know anybody else that's buying this headset is gonna kayak. It might have to be something I do on my own and kind of chill out with these cool kayak voyages here. But that being said, I think it's a really cool game. Looks beautiful. That's what you want, for VR. I'm all about the immersion factor of like those really nice, visuals, feeling like you're really in that space when you look around you. So I think it looks really cool. You see some of the racing here they got going on. Looks like some good fun. Really, really fun looking game there. We also have Pavlov. This is a game I had not heard about. it texts me into my date of birth, which is maybe gives me a good warning to not show this on our podcast because we try to keep it kind of PG-13 here, and that's probably a good reason not to. I have seen that trailer personally, and all I'll say it's just typical like first-person shooter gameplay. But it does look fairly realistic. I want to say it did give me like a Call of Duty or even like a Rainbow Six kind of look. Like I'm not saying it's exactly like those games in any way in terms of like feature sets and communities and all that stuff, but it did have multiplayer squad, gameplay. You play against 5 other people who were all on VR as well. It looked like they had a World War II mode. You could drive vehicles and like jeeps and stuff, and you had tanks you could drive. There was something else that I'm losing my train of thought now, but I thought was very interesting. There they had kind of like I think I'm just confusing it with the Rainbow Six mode, but very much so like had a lot of really interesting gameplay mechanics and shooting mechanics like that really felt interesting. It looked like they had some player movement that wasn't like just like point and click. It looked like they had fluid player movement, of course, fluid movements. You're aiming, you're ducking, you're shooting out windows. It looks pretty like a really immersive military game. So if you're into that, again, I didn't show it just because I had that warning there. I was like, probably best not to do so, but I would recommend if you are into shooters and you think you can handle that kind of stuff, then by all means, I think that that's a cool one of the coolest VR shooters on PC right now. Apparently, according to this, it's the most popular PC VR shooter right now at the moment. So that's something. We have puzzling pieces here. This one I'm not super familiar with, but I know it's a jigsaw puzzle game. So you're kind of like 3D moving things around and piecing them together in VR, which I've seen some apps and some other mobile games do this really effectively because it's kind of like use motion controls and some kind of cool stuff like that. And I think it's gonna be really, really fun for a VR game. I think more VR games where you're like working almost like we're gonna see a lot of this in AR. I think when AR really blows up in the near future, but like when working with things in your hands and manipulating things, like you always see in those old, like even like more sort of a sci-fi, or even like when HoloLens from Microsoft was first announced, they were like, you can make your own Minecraft world. People were like pinching and dragging, and then you're like, oh, here's like they make this mountain out of bricks, and then you're like doing this, and like you're just like dragging out, like you're just the god of your own universe kind of type of gameplay. I think that's just really kind of interesting. It like, reminds me of like Iron Man, where he's like picking and pulling parts. He's like, hey, I'm gonna do this in your flux capacitors over here. He's just kind of like throwing random like holograms around and like stuff's happening. So again, that's I'm making a joke here, but that's not really that far off. Like this is the future we're actually walking into here with like in terms of augmented reality and VR. So like the more I see games like this and manipulating digital environments and like up the scale, like it looks like a whole digital like spaceship kind of like place here this person's building. So again, it's a really cool concept to me. I think this stuff's really interesting. This is another one called Song in the Smoke Rekindled. You can see it right there. It's like another bow and arrow type game. It's a survival action adventure game. Okay, I might play a little of this in the background if they'll let me. It looks to be about a 15 plus hour single player campaign, which is very interesting. And you have a lot of challenges as you challenge a savage world. You have immersive VR crafting. That's kind of interesting. There, you build a camp, and then you cook food over the fire, and you have to eat to survive. That looks really interesting. Actually, I like the idea of that. I think anything in VR, when you can have these first person elements and have it like, I guess VR now, we're getting more to advanced VR where it doesn't look as cheesy and it looks more high quality and you can move around and it's not as jittery. The more and more we get to this place where we're immersing ourselves in these worlds in a way, I think, more impactful way. And I think I just think it's really fascinating. Obviously, I'm a fan of VR, so like even if these games may seem smaller to you or you're not sure if you're interested, I really think the implications for what VR is becoming and even is right now, and maybe in the next month or so, what it will be is really exciting. That's just me. Again, I'm all this stuff that usually excites me, but I think that's why I love talking about it. It's great stuff. We have another rhythm game here. Speaking of whatchamacallit, of Beat Saber not being in the launch lineup, although it is supposed to be coming, we do have another rhythm like beat kind of action game here where it looks like you kind of have to like shoot and fight alongside dodge these obstacles. Got these you got these what do you call those little power-ups there alongside music. You have to like bump at the right moment. I think they said like heavy bass line, kind of like like as all great rhythm games have, where your action is supposed to kind of coincide with that rhythm and with that the music. So very, very cool. It's a remastered PSVR game with all the everything you see there. It's SSD optimization, free upgraders, haptics, everything, you name it. Synth riders, and that's coming PSVR, I believe, on launch day, if not in the launch window. I'm gonna have to wait and see. Thumper, I'm actually confusing this with Thumper. That's why Thumper was the one I was just talking about, where it had like that heavy baseline, like action gameplay linked up with your rhythm game. So another rhythm game here, very similar, but that's what I saw here. It says psychedelic visuals, a throbbing soundtrack, adrenalizing boss battles, and pure rhythm violence. That's the description of this game. So very much like it starts action packed, kind of like like I said, like those kind of like heavy baseline, kind of like adrenaline pumping type rhythm games where you're kind of in sync, hitting things in a certain pattern to keep on with it. Sounds pretty cool. Sounds energetic. This next one I'm pretty excited about as well. I've seen a lot of commercials for this NFL Pro Era for the Meta Quest. Actually, that's like the main game they're using to promote their Meta Quest during all of their sports coverage. So, we always have, I have a lot of sports fans in my family. We're always watching, the NFL games or whatever's on, baseball, basketball. And I've seen the commercial for NFL Pro Era about like 50 times already. And I've heard my dad say, "Oh, we should get that game. Or we should play that game." I wanted to play this game since I saw it. I thought it was so cool. You can pretty much pick your own plays, set the route, and be like, all right, I'm gonna hit that receiver right when he cuts, on the wide route, and then you can actually play out that play and like avoid getting sacked. It's like it looks way more in depth than I maybe gave it credit for when I first saw the commercial. And then the more I saw the commercial, I looked into it. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I hope they put this on PSVR too, because I might want to get PSVR too. Thankfully, lo and behold, yesterday they announced it's coming to PSVR 2. I'm not sure if there's any upgrades here. That's one thing I was curious about, since you had some expansive, enhanced editions, whatever you want to call it there. The tongue twisters here today. With NFL Pro Era, though, I was wondering, like, maybe we'll get more high def visuals, some more like improvements, maybe some eye tracking stuff, like upgraded to PSVR, because I know that PSVR 2 could probably do a lot more there than maybe the Meta Quest can do with just that setup. You have all the power of the PS5 and the PlayStation VR headset here now to do all those upgrades. So either way, I'm sure I'm pretty excited to try that out. I think it's pretty cool. I was just a football fan to be able to like run like set plays and be like, oh, he's gonna do a hook route. All right, as soon as he stops there and turns around, I'm gunning the ball. Like it's cool to be in the mind of a quarterback like that in like a realistic setting and actually see the rush and stuff. I think this kind of thing will be really cool for just like practicing like your own plays as a quarterback. You talk about training sims and things like that for certain sports and occupations. This is a really cool system here, it seems. So I'm wondering to see how they'll evolve that and how these things will get more and more accurate and like pinpoint accurate. And then it's like then that gets to the level of like people who are training to be quarterbacks in real life. Like, maybe I'll use this game then if it's that accurate. It's like some car sims have really gotten to that level, I feel like, at this point. Like I said before, you can see some professional racers will sit and they'll train on their racing sims for hours. And like when they can't get to a real track, they're racing on the sim track, and like vice versa. So it's very interesting to see this, especially over the advent of VR, how this comes into play of any type of physical activity or training for any type of real life. Putting yourself in those shoes, more so in those hands. I guess when we're talking VR here, but very, very interesting. I'm going to move on here. We have What the Bat. This comes from the What the Golf team. If you haven't heard of that game. So I'm sure it'll be interesting in VR. You're doing a lot of like goofy things with golf clubs in that game. So this game, you have bats for hands, and you're probably trying to like do a lot of like mundane tasks and maybe even play baseball and stuff while using those bats. So you saw they were like pulling pieces of toast into a toaster. There's a lot of like, maybe they're brushing your teeth there with the bat. Looks a lot of like goofy mini games. Looks like a really fun game from the creators over there. We're going to keep going here. We have Resco Infinite, which is actually a sequel to, I believe, a PSVR original launch title, which was Res Infinite. So this is, or I believe this is a remaster here. I'm going to say, I feel like I remember Res Infinite being the title of the first one as well, if I'm not mistaken. So they say we're excited to be back here just in time for the launch of PSVR 2. Want yourself for the ultimate version of Res. This is the original game redone, revamped for PSVR 2. It's the ultimate version of Res, a thrilling journey of sights, sounds, and shooting action. Except this time in PSVR 2 and eye tracking, you can track and aim at enemies and haptic feedback from the controllers and headset feedback. This is what got me excited before when I was talking about that eye tracking and the implications of other games, because this is one game doing now, and I was kind of saying I'll be excited if someone else implemented, where you could basically, instead of, I was talking a lot about before about like latency, and like if I want to be like the most accurate with my aiming, right? For say I'm playing with a controller or even a keyboard and mouse, for me to be accurate with my aiming, I have to my screen has to display that enemy, so it's the refresh rate of my screen, wherever you have like that latency there. So then it's B, my eyes see the enemy, then see that like bounces back to the me going to my controller and going, okay, I need to move my stick to go to that direction to like line up with that. Then next step is then pulling the trigger. So that's like there's multiple steps there. It doesn't sound, it sounds very simple when I say it like that, but like, so see an enemy in a multiplayer game and shoot at that enemy. It's like you have to like have the input, the feedback from you seeing them, and the output from your controller, and the feedback of that reaction. There are a lot of steps there. With this, it's now just, I can replay that maybe. It's literally now just I look and then I pull the trigger. It's like I made a joke. I was talking about this with a friend of mine. It's like almost like being the Terminator, like that targeting, like a little targeting system in your eyes. I think it's so cool. Like not that not that maybe a Terminator game, that would be really cool. I'm not saying they have to do that, but I'm thinking like for any game, I would love this feature just to play like a normal game, like I'm playing Call of Duty, like I said before, and I'm trying to be competitive about aiming. I have my controller. Instead of me worrying about me twitching with the right stick, I can be using it to kind of like general aim, but then I see the guy and I'm like, oh, and I kind of like, not to go crazy eyes at the camera, but I'm kind of like, oh, laser eyes, and just kind of go right at him. So you wouldn't even have to have that like that lag there, literally that latency of, oh, I see them with my eyes, now that light goes back to my eye, I move the stick, and then I shoot. It's no, I see them, and not only my eye has to then move the stick, like I'm already moving my eye to see them. So as soon as I see them, that whole process is already done, and then it's just pulling the trigger. So it's a very I'm not sure if I'm making sense there, but it's like all of the residual, like your reaction time. Forget about if you're a fast reactor, like they call people like Twitch shooters, like how fast your Twitch reaction time is. You don't even have to have that anymore. You don't have to have a reaction time. You don't have to see somebody then translate into a controller to do what you want to do in the game. Now your person in the game is seeing that person and then just executing. You don't have to have the real life version of yourself, actually putting in those inputs when your eyeballs are already doing it. You're physically doing that for yourself. You don't need a physical input to translate, your translation of motion, which is like, I get, maybe I'm going off tangent there. Maybe that sounds a little like a weird aside, but like, I think that'd be great for any shooter game. I think that's a huge, like, especially if you're a competitive game, you're all about like latency and how fast like a Twitch shoot. Like I've tried out with gyro aiming and kind of like motion controls alongside with regular aiming and seeing how that worked with games. Usually it's kind of tough. Some people can do it really well because they can really like flick their wrist to a certain spot and know exactly where the gyro aim is going to land, similar to like a mouse movement. That's why they say mouse is the best for accuracy. But again, still, I think having a gyro where essentially in your eyeballs movement, I'm not even say it there, but I think it's just really, really interesting. So that's just about it there. I'm going to move on from Resident Evil. We have Tetris Effect connected. I don't think I'm going to get through every single rest of the games here, but we're almost done. Tetris kind of speaks for itself. I feel like reinventing a classic. If you're a fan of Tetris, I don't really feel like I need to describe too much more about what's going on there. I hope you can forgive me for skipping that whole description. But we have Creed Rise to Glory here. It's another pre-existing VR game. I'm not sure where other platforms it's on. I believe it's maybe on the Meta Quest as well. I'm not sure if it's on the original PlayStation VR. I'm guessing not. But it's in partnership with MGM for like the Creed movie. Creed 3 is coming out on March 3rd, which is my birthday, actually. 3/3/23. And before then, they're going to have Creed Rise to Glory Championship Edition, this boxing VR game coming to PSVR too, which sounds really cool. Excuse me. Again, like I said before, I have a little bit of a cold today, so I apologize. I'm sounding a little nasally here today. I apologize. But as I was saying here, again, another cool sports game to have. I think when you're in VR, you might as well. It's like I think of like Wii Sports. It's like if I have these motion controllers, I want to be able to do the baseball game. I want to play tennis. I want to I want to box. I want to do everything with these motion controllers. It's almost how I feel about the VR headset. I'm like, now that I have this ability, I want one for every sports game. I want one for like every type of like mundane thing, driving a car, like simulator, and they're getting there. Gran Turismo, like we're hitting all those notes. It seems like so. I think it's a really interesting and like to see like more and more like commercial properties, something like especially like Rocky and Creed, this kind of franchise with MGM, putting money into VR and seeing this as a worthwhile investment. There are I have said in the past, there are a few like wish list things I have for PSVR. Like you guys, if you've been following the show, know I'm a Spider-Man fan, so anything they could do there. Like that one VR experience they had, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to play it because it's only on PSVR 1, and I don't see them upgrading this. But back when I think it was No Way Home, that movie came out a few years back, they made a PSVR Spider-Man experience where you could actually pull the triggers and swing, in first person. And it was a little, I'm sure it was a little wonky there. I saw some gameplay online and probably wasn't like the full-fledged Spider-Man experience that I'm maybe looking for, that kind of immersion. But if Insomniac was in any way capable of making like an alternative camera mode where I could just go and play their game with the headset on, or even have motion control. I wouldn't even expect the motion controls to work, but just have the motion controls and be swinging. Like, oh my god, that would be my favorite like VR game ever. Because that's all I like. I would love to be able to do that. But even just like the most mundane things, like when I first tried out, I think it was the HTC Vive, I want to say, and my first like really accurate VR headset, which was only last year. It's like a really long time ago. It was about 2 years ago, I would say, a year or two ago. But I mean, it really blew my mind with the motion tracking and how accurate it was. I mean, I had gone from maybe briefly trying a PSVR. I believe someone else had. I tried at one point. I tried some, phone, like back like the Galaxy, AR headsets. They were all like cell phone based at the time, and some of those still are more so like a Google Cardboard type of situation. But though with those tracking, those tracking beacons in the corners of the rooms, I was playing ping pong and just being able to look at the paddle on my controller and go like this and raise my fingers off the controller and then see my fingers move around the ping pong paddle in the game and have that finger tracking, which is also does on PSVR. I couldn't believe it. Like, I think that's something, one of those things where you can understand it when you think about it, but then when you're in that headset and your brain sends you the signals of like, this is real, this is your hand, like you get that slight confusion for a split second. It's a really weird feeling, and I think it's kind of like it's cool to see how much further we could probably get with VR. It's kind of eerie in a way too. It's kind of creepy. It's like, whoa, like how indistinguishable from reality can we get? And that's like, I'm getting more to describing the start of a Black Mirror episode here, but I think you guys are understanding, why I get excited about this stuff. But yeah, then again, if we can get anything else, like any more sports games, like for first person, like a baseball swinging in the bat box game from MLB The Show, another perfect Sony Santa Monica, get them tied in there. Oh, I'm not Sony Santa Monica, Sony San Diego, excuse me. Maybe that's something they could do and pull off. So that'd be super, super cool. And as an aside here, and probably not more so PlayStation Studios as Activision, but they maybe could do. They have a lot of partnerships together. They've done some stuff in the past like this. Is maybe Call of Duty, and maybe that's a stretch there. But if Call of Duty had any interest of having like one of their campaign missions, they're big on those really tactical, like door to door, SEAL team type campaign missions these days. Having like one mission like that, making that a VR experience or something like that could be, I think that'd be a no-brainer. It might sell a lot of extra PSVRs too, get a lot of attention on that. And I think it'd be like, in terms of like tactical, like immersing yourself in a tactical scenario, I can't think of like another game from the PlayStation at least ecosystem right now that could do that better. And I think that'd be really impressive. And obviously I mentioned that game Tarkov before. No disrespect to Tarkov. I'm sure I'll get my, feel for that game if I try that game out. I'm not sure. But that being said, I feel like Call of Duty, for them at least, it'd be a very smart move, I think, for both them and PlayStation. And that being said, we have a few more here. I'm gonna play this trailer for the last Clockwinder while I talk about more about that. But what I was gonna say was, before I went to this trailer, this looks really cool as well. It's just it's all about marketing here. It's about what I'm doing right now. Like people wanting to buy. Well, I'm not doing it right now. I don't work for Sony or anything. I'm just saying, like, what I'm interested, like what I'm doing now is reading these articles. Like, we need people like to know about VR, want to invest in VR. And historically, VR has not been, a very high investment product. It's more of a niche product. Even with Sony and Apple and like some of these companies really going, all in on VR right now, it's still going to be a bit difficult, I think, to get people really engaged and really investing here. And I hate to say it, but I think you just need to really it's one of those things where you kind of need success before the success comes, if that makes sense. I feel like you need to come out with these huge, like high profile, really, really good VR games that are only accessible on VR, or else it's gonna fade out. It's gonna be like PSVR 1, where it's like there's some great releases, but it kind of, people say it's kind of still a fad, and then it fades out, and then we'll wait for a new generation of things to really get, going off and impressing us again. It's like, oh, maybe these will stick around. It's like we need to get to a point where, unfortunately, I think you're going to need a lot of initial investment that may come in some losses, a lot of initial investment just in VR in general, of like, look, this is what we're doing. Same way it happened with Game Pass and other platforms that people may not believed in as much in the beginning. It's like, look, like we got to stick with this. This is the future of what we're doing. And I'm not saying VR is replacing anything or is the future of gaming in general or anything. There's 100% still a place for, 2D and on monitor, on screen gaming. I'm not insinuating there isn't, but I do think, that we do need to see more and more adoption from the industry, and they need to more so invest in it themselves to really promote people in the future being like, oh, we should all go get the VR headset. Like, 'cause right now it's like, why should we, if we know that it may not be supported or it's going to be niche and I don't know when my friends are going to have it, they got to get over that barrier of like those first huge couple of like huge mainstream must have titles, being VR titles, and everybody's talking about it. Like, I'm not sure we're really at that point yet. We have things like Half-Life, Alex, and stuff, and some other really notable VR titles, for lack of a better memory right now. And hopefully, these PSVR 2 launch titles like Horizon Call of the Mountain blows me out of the water. Maybe it's better than I anticipate. I'm thinking right now it's gonna be a cool game. VR, maybe not like blow you out of the water type of game if you're not a Horizon fan. But I'm not sure. I don't want to keep the benefit of the doubt out there. So that being said, I'll kind of digress there. Going back to the Clockwinder here, as we're almost done. This game, I'm just going to read out the description here, is a puzzle automation game about making synchronized contraptions out of your own clones. You play as Jules, a young woman on a mission. Shout out to Jules, my sister. Happy birthday. By the way, her birthday's tomorrow. A young woman on a mission to repair a clock tower, an ancient haven for the galaxy's plants and seeds that's fallen into disrepair. Use the Clockwinder's gloves to turn everything you do to a perfectly looping clockwork clone. Create an interconnected system of clones to grow plants, harvest resources, and synthesize new seeds. You can coordinate your clones to create a marvels of precision teamwork, harebrained Rube Goldberg machines, and a troupe of synchronized dancers. So that's very interesting. So it looks like you're performing these actions here. Like I said, then you can clone them and reproduce these actions that you're doing, and they have these little assembly lines going on here. Like I said, it could be, you can make your own custom assembly lines. So you can make a Rube Goldberg machine with a bunch of crazy stuff happening. You can make like I said, a synchronized, a dance or some sort of synchronized event. Seems pretty cool. It seems like a nice little creative space to play, something to play around with in VR. I really enjoy seeing unique VR concepts, because I know right now I just went on a whole tangent of I love to see more things you do in real life, and driving cars and handling objects, and things that are can be easily simulated, using your hands. And it's of course, but I also think, like any medium, but especially video games, we have a huge opportunity here to also use our hands for things we would never even imagine, or interact with worlds in ways we would never even dream of interacting with the real world. And that's where things can get really interesting. So again, that looked really very cool. Like the idea of the clones. And that about brings me to the end of the article here. So I want to recap everything we didn't mention here, what was just covered. Of course, we have that Star Wars game coming, with that Walking Dead game coming. We talked about those before. A few others here I feel like may not have been mentioned. Pistol Whip, that's a pretty popular, I believe, shooter VR game online. Job Simulator as well was not mentioned here. Excuse me, I'm just getting a bit nasally here. Sorry, guys. A bit under the weather today. We're almost done. We're right at the end of the show here, so I'm just working through it. But we also have Moss Book 2. I just wanted to note that as well. I mean, people were looking forward to that, especially. And of course, a few other games here. Horizon Call of the Mountain, of course, is probably the main launch game for the PSVR 2. Pavlov, as I mentioned earlier. Tentacular is one I may have not mentioned. Cities VR, I may not have mentioned. Altair Breaker. I'm just going to list a few more of those. After the Fall. The Dark Picture Switchback. I talked about that briefly, I think, last week, kind of just as an example. Also about the blinking feature of the monster in that game, but that's another eye tracking feature game there that works great. Cosmonius High is one people are very much looking forward to as well. Unfortunately, I don't have time to get through all these here. Jurassic World Aftermath, Kazuna AI, Jurassic World. I already said Jurassic World. Sorry. Fantavision 2020X, Dyschronia, Chronos Alternate. These are all games that people are looking forward to. So that being said, it kind of wraps up here. I did just want to get that on screen, though. So that's the full list, no confusion there, a full list and developer of all of the 30 launch games for PSVR 2 coming before March of 2023, or the end of March of 2023, I should say, because this is coming late February, and we need a few weeks there of all these game releases. So sounds good. Sounds exciting. I will, like I said last time, I will let you guys know how I feel about this console. If I do, I keep saying if, but I don't think I'm canceling that pre-order, so it's going to probably coming in the next month or so. So I will let you know how I feel about that and me making that leap to invest in the PSVR. And so you'll get my unfiltered, unbiased, responses there. But that being said, that's about the end of all of our news today. I just realized here I never did my little docket marker there with the infinity marker. So as I switch it now, it should have been down here for the launch games, but that's okay. I mean, we were just talking about Redfall and that for a long time anyway. So hopefully, you guys enjoyed everything we had to talk about today. Obviously, it was a bit of a bummer episode. So, hopefully, things, take a turn for the better come next week and comes, 2023 here as we look forward to the future of the industry. But that being said, I do want to wish my best to everyone in the industry. I want to thank everyone who watched today and everyone who may be rewatching now or later. I really appreciate you tuning in on this report. It really means a lot to me. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, there's things that you don't like with the UI here that I have, there's things that you want me to change, or things that maybe aren't clear, or things I can adjust with my timestamps, or things I'm doing here, please let me know. I'm more than happy to accommodate and make sure you guys are getting all the information you want and all the news that I think is, hopefully relevant every week. I try to stay as unbiased here as possible, because I'm just one person. So, I'm reading, our gaming news websites and our Twitter and our, all the, different, locations where people are discussing these on games. And I try to make sure that if it's a major story, people are talking about it, even if it's a game I don't necessarily like personally or want to talk about personally, I'm talking about it because I want to make sure that you guys all you get the news you want to get. So that's all. I really appreciate you guys hopping on today. And again, let me know anything else, comments, suggestions, concerns. I am all ears. But check us out in the Discord as well. I'll be posting these in the Discord as well as all of our other social links and everything there if you want to keep up with Endless. But that being said, I will let you know. You may have heard a lot of episodes be saying, stay tuned, stay tuned. A lot happening in the spring and Endless. It's coming up very, very soon. So you're going to hear come February, come April, especially. This is a big, big year for a lot of new Endless platform news. And I won't say anything else because I want to keep that under wraps a bit. But we're getting really excited here at Endless to share everything we've been working on with you guys. And our team has been doing incredible work. Shout out to them. So that being said, I will leave you guys with until then, right? But have a great weekend. Take care. And I will talk to you on the next episode of the Endless Report. So I'm going to put my thank you screen up here and see you guys on the next episode. All right. Take care.